The Valley of Defilement is home to all the unwanted things of the world. The reigning order and its adherents could not find a place for everything or everyone, and so all the things unwanted came to reside here, where they can fester and rot together. A saint from the church has come to the valley, Maiden Astrea, and it is to her that the discarded peoples of the valley search to have their pain removed. In Demon Souls, the soul grants men clarity, and in removing the souls of those who suffer in the valley, Maiden Astrea also removes that clarity and frees these people from the consciousness of their agony. The setting is brimming with the idea of impurity, Kegare, but Maiden Astrea's story and the philosophical conundrum of her actions is not framed there so much as it is in the mind, which is strange because the valley, on a quick glance, doesn't seem to be exploring the conflict of the mind radiating even when surrounded by the impurity of the world. It's subdued, but it is there. Do you like snails? They're interesting. And in Bloodborne, they're essentially made to be From Software's antithesis to the centipedes. The latter is seen in that game's vermin. It's seen in the centipede demon of Dark Souls, in the Saint of the Bud, and the Halleckbrand from Elden Ring. We see it in Sekiro's Impure Immortals, and in Demon Souls, we see it in Latria. What unifies the appearance of the centipede across all of these games is how they are a stand-in for impurity. When you see the centipede, you're never far from it, but the snail is symbolic for enlightenment. In Bloodborne, we see ethereal snails flowing from the skull of Madman's knowledge, and snails and slugs are repeated symbols in the items which are affiliated with the Great Ones and phantasms. And in Demon Souls, snails also connect to the idea of enlightenment and the mind. The snails we encounter in the Shrine of Storms live in a glowing pool of souls. Remember that in this game the soul is clarity, and the snails of the valley are seen hugging the large sword of moonlight. Because Demon Souls links souls and the mind, the soul pool snails in the Shrine of Storms are easy to connect to it as well, but the ones in the valley maybe need a helping hand. An internet fable of the Buddha says that one day he was meditating using a tree's shadow as protection from the heat. But as time passed, the sun's placement in the sky changed so that eventually it shone directly on his bald head. A wandering snail saw this and feared that the heat would disrupt the Buddha's meditation, so he made his way to the Buddha's head and sacrificed his life to cool him down. Other snails saw and followed until 108 had sacrificed themselves for this task. The fable was likely born when someone observed that the Buddha is often displayed with spiral curls. Whether this fable is true or not, I figure that those who pursue enlightenment might get a kick out of how unshackled from the physical world snails are. They live without a structured formal outline and are capable of adapting and reshaping themselves to whatever occasion arises. Snails are a special creature. Bloodborne tells the story of the old blood, which makes the human body malleable, and it uses snail imagery whenever it needs to quickly connect something to the arcane. It also tells the story of enlightenment, of scholars who pursue it and the lengths they go to see their dreams of a celestial awakening realized. Like the snails in the Valley of Defilement, the scholars in Bloodborne are attracted to the moonlight. And the reason for this is because the moon is a stand-in for enlightenment, just like how centipedes are a stand-in for impurity. There is something beautiful about sacrificing one's self to preserve what little light the dark places of the world have, but it is horrifying to watch that image be twisted by those who have confused themselves about what the light is. In this video, we'll be discussing enlightenment, and the moon and the mind, the cosmos, and all those things which hover above, which do not sink and stagnate, but instead are reflected on a water's surface. Impurities can lie in the bottom of a lake, but however great the seedbed might be, the impurities cannot touch the moon's reflection. Just like how a truly enlightened mind cannot be tainted by the poisonous lure of attachment. Hi, this is me, dear old Uncle AesirAesthetics. Hope you have a cup of coffee on hand. Let's dive in. From King Alant in Demon Souls all the way through to the Research Institute in Fires of Rubicon, in these games we are constantly being met with those who seek to learn more about the nature of the world. What is revealed to those who pry deep into concealed truth is often more horrifying than they could have ever imagined, and they can never go back because the search for the truth changes them. On day one, the madman in Bloodborne might have never thought to knowingly spread the beast plague in Yharnam, but every incremental step they took towards realizing their dreams of ascension made them accept more and more horrors. When they first discovered the Old Blood in the Chalice dungeons, all they knew was that it blurred the boundaries of their lives. But it must have not been long before they saw that overindulgence in the stuff eventually shatters the physical form and reshapes people into beasts. No problem, keep it isolated from the world at large and continue to study it. That was the idea with Birkenworth, but just like how the search for knowledge changes a man, it also changes an institution. And Provost Willem, the headmaster of the place, was in the end not able to restrain his students' impulses for knowledge. On day one, this wasn't the plan. So I wonder, in Demon Souls, did Alant search for the Old One and the Soul Arts because he wanted to destroy mankind, or is that the conclusion he reached after bringing the Soul Arts back and seeing what men made of them? The search for truth changes you. And so before you embark, be sure that you're okay with any outcome you might reach on the other end, because what is revealed might be best left unknown. Something shared by Alant and the Mensis scholars is that their views are not entirely changed, only their tolerance for evil. In the end, Alant does not judge mankind by a framework or standard he's recently developed. He sees humans acting like demons and judges them by the human morality he has. Mikolash is clearly insane, but he is still trying to ascend. These men have changed, but their failure to become more might be down to how they hold on to all their too human perspective, even after they should be adequately developed from who they were when the pursuit of knowledge and power began. Perhaps knowledge is best approached ex nihilo. Start from nothing. Abandon your attachment to everything you take for granted, because every notion and perspective you will have at the end of your journey will be those which justified themselves on their own merit. Uncomfortable truths must not be avoided, comforting lies must not be suffered. In Elden Ring, this conflict of the pain of knowledge is exemplified in the story of Goldmask. He saw that there was something not right in the Golden Order, and when he was confronted with the contradiction that Marika was the one true god, but also that Radakon and Marika were one and the same, he did not despair. He realized the ramifications of the lie and sought to remedy the situation. To understand his story and the greater ramifications of its actors in the greater context of Elden Ring, I think it's important to talk about the finger pointing at the moon. The finger pointing at the moon is a Buddhist idea. A Zen master who is instructing his students points to the moon and uses it as a stand-in for enlightenment. He then says that the Buddha's teachings are like a finger pointing to the moon. Through the teachings and the right living, one may reach enlightenment. However, it is essential to not confuse the finger for the moon. The finger is how you're made to look at the moon, it's not what you're meant to be looking at. This story illustrates how the meaning is more important than the method. I discussed a very similar idea in the Silent Hill 3 commentary all those years ago, when I talked about skillful means. The idea there was that the practice one undertakes to achieve enlightenment is not something to ultimately get hung up on. Different tools for different paths. If you need to cross a river, a boat is a good tool. If you need to cross a mountain, a boat is a terrible tool. It is the destination we must keep in mind and staying true to reaching it. Getting hung up on the how is not useful, and the finger pointing at the moon story has the same concept applied to the sutras themselves. The sutra points to enlightenment like a finger points to the moon. You're not meant to look at the finger, it's just there to get you to see the moon. Goldmask travels the lands between in search of the truth of the Golden Order, and he is followed by his would-be student Corrin. Goldmask is in communion with the greater will with the movement of his fingers, like the two fingers are. The lands between are seen over by the two fingers who speak to the greater will and communicate its message to the finger readers. The world has so lost the plot that they are literally doing the bidding of the finger which points to the moon/greater will. As Goldmask begins to unravel more and more of the contradictions of the Golden Order, the movement of his fingers stops entirely. This causes Corin a great deal of distress, because he is looking at the fingers, not what their movement represents. And unless we offer him the tonic of forgetfulness, his inability to truly question the world will end with him slaying Goldmask, stating he was nothing more than a madman for ever questioning the perfection of the Golden Order. But the Golden Order is flawed. If intentional, the story of Goldmask Corin and Elden Ring's two fingers is the most blatant implementation of the lesson of the finger pointing at the moon FromSoft has yet included in their games. No, Goldmask is not pointing at the literal moon, but for the purposes of this video I'm going to ask that everybody imbibes the lesson of the finger pointing at the moon story. The moon is not literally the moon, it is the concept of enlightenment. Goldmask is pointing to reach a truth. That is what matters. Whether it's called enlightenment or wisdom or ascension or the Eldritch Truth, the idea is the same. There's something just out of humanity's reach, and the scholars risk everything pursuing it. In most cases I'll discuss, the moon will feature heavily and be deeply tied to the idea of enlightenment, but for Goldmask, we'll accept that the Earth Tree suffices. The reason to pursue enlightenment is to escape the suffering of life. Existence is cyclical. The human soul is passed through the cycle of the world over and over again because it has committed the cardinal error of attaching itself to the world. Whether emotionally or materially, attachment binds you to the cycle of reincarnation, and enlightenment is the escape. The scholars in Bloodborne pursue enlightenment and ascension to great onehood, but they are responsible for the beast plague and the hunts. Every so often, the beast problem becomes so hectic that hunters are needed to put them down. This is the suffering in the world of Bloodborne. When you look at illustrations of the Wheel of Samsara, you will see the moon hovering above it. An enlightened mind can escape the cycle of samsara and ascend to reach nirvana. The self is an illusion, a dream we can awaken from. The awakening, or bodhi, is how you reach nirvana. No more illusion of self, no more dreaming.
You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. You will be freed from this terrible hunter's dream.
If all you wanted from this video was the core idea, that the moon is tied to enlightenment and that enlightenment is the escape from the cycle of reincarnation, there you have it. But if you want to dig deeper and perhaps see just how FromSoft applies, twists, and subverts this theme, keep watching. The moon is symbolic for enlightenment, so the scholars in these games often look to it. In Bloodborne, the scholars of Byrgenwerth pried into the Eldritch Truth and hunted the Great Ones to uncover their secrets. They wished to ascend, and to accomplish that, they experimented with the Old Blood. Provost Willem believed the repeated failure to ascend lay in the pitiful state of mankind's minds. He believed that what was needed was not more Old Blood, but rather meditation. Before you make your form malleable, you must grow eyes insight, must gain insight, and what will result when you then do ingest the Old Blood will be transcendence. But this caused a rift within Byrgenwerth. Lawrence, the main villain of Bloodborne, wasn't interested in spending years meditating on the hope that Willem was right. He saw that time better spent trying to reach ascension through trial and error. Before they parted ways, Willem told him to remember their adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood.
But in the original Japanese, the saying is more like, the blood makes us human no more. The core difference, lost in translation, is that the blood makes us human no more, because that's not being undone, That's just changing. And because it makes us human no more, and because our eyes are yet to open, we should fear the old blood. Lawrence told Willem he would remember the Bergenworth adage, but when we get to Yharnam and see what he created, there's scant mentions of enlightenment but a plethora of old blood. The people here say their farewells by mentioning blood. I've often noted how I really like the mid-game reveal that it's all eldritch gods and such, but that was a plot twist is actually a really interesting piece of storytelling. The church doesn't worship enlightenment, it worships the blood. If we go back to the finger pointing at the moon, Lawrence and the healing church confused the old blood for ascension, like how the student might confuse the master's finger for the moon. After the healing church took over Yharnam, it followed in Bergenworth's footsteps and had its own schism, Mensis and the choir. Mensis was formed by the hardliners who believed the problem was that the church wasn't experimenting enough, and they wanted to just brute force ascension. To that end, they perform a ritual to draw the moon to them. They wish for the red moon to descend such that they can be granted an audience with the Great One so that it can grant their wishes to be given insight. They want brains with eyes. And after the red moon fries their brains, Murgo's wet nurse delivers on this request. In the most literal sense possible, Mensis is given a brain with eyes. I talked in my Kegare video about how I think that these game worlds have their themes folded in them, specifically with Elevation and Kegare. So Mensis is the Impurity faction, and they are located in the lowest elevation of the game. But there's another layer to this. Enlightenment and the moon hover above, so the closer you are to the cosmos, the closer you are to the truth of the world. That might be why the summoning of the One Reborn, in the Advent Plaza, starts with the moon itself being blotted out with a black smoke, because for Mensis, enlightenment was not meant to be. The choir is aligned more so with the ideas of Willem, and to that end, they're located in the highest elevation, outside of the nightmares, close to the moon. Willem also sought to be close to the moon. Reaching him is quite a descent, maybe even more so than the Advent Plaza now that I think about it. The themes with elevation bit I just went into still applies if you consider there's a cosmic-looking centipede, Kegare, outside of Bergenworth, perhaps symbolizing a sort of deviant or corrupted enlightenment. Or enlightened corruption. Not sure, but Bergenworth is still very moon-coded and Willem is intrigued by the moon. His balcony is a tsukimi, Japanese for moon viewing platform, and the choir also has a tsukimi. It's where we pick up the make contact gesture, and it's facing the astral clock tower. And just like how the centipede in Bergenworth might symbolize a corruption in the institution of learning, the astral clock tower might symbolize a flaw in the choir's approach. The hunter's nightmare was born from the curse of Kos. The curse bears the mark of the blood-drunk hunters. The eye begins to melt and more irises pop up in the eye. That's also the icon which Elden Ring uses for madness, and the moon in the nightmare has this effect applied to it as well. And, in the nightmare, the astral clock tower is the entrance to the nightmare fishing hamlet where the corpse of Kos resides. When the choir tries to make contact, they actually are reaching out to something which is there, but it might not be what they think. The path they follow is ended prematurely by the descent of the red moon. It might have been a dead end all along. They followed in Willem's footsteps, but he is stagnant. He actually has mushrooms growing on his neck. Celestial mushrooms, just like the ones we can see on the milkweed rune, but that's a stagnant rune. Its Japanese name is seedbed, because that's all you become when you apply it. A seedbed for phantasms. As it turns out, a blue glow does not enlightenment make. Perhaps the choir would have had some grander fate in store if they'd have had more time to meditate, but that was not meant to be. Latriam, or the Tower of, is also an institution of learning which has a high elevation. It also did the Brain of Mensis thing before Bloodborne did, but then so did Shadow Tower Abyss. Anyways, in Latria, we see another deranged pursuit of knowledge, but I think an important point of separation from it and the Healing Church is the unique quirk which Demon Souls has in the idea of evil, the ability of the soul to shape the world, and how its physical presence is informed by and informs the minds of men. Those who exercise reason are granted knowledge, those who pray are granted revelations, because miracles and magic are actually the same thing. The Beast Talisman's item description reads, an old wooden amulet resembling the old one. It can utilize both miracles and spells. The symbol of God was nothing more than the image of the old one. The existence of this talisman seems to suggest that the catalyst for sorcery's talismans for miracles rule only exists because people believe it has to. Because they are deluded from seeing what the world really is. Rather than either one being in communion with a higher force, it might just be that the forces here, the church and the wizards, are manifesting their beliefs like the idea of evil from Berserk. So, if humanity chooses kindness, then kindness will be manifested in the world. But if they choose evil, evil will manifest, to punish mankind if they stray away from the proper path. This read of the game is additionally supported by some item descriptions and the character tendency system. The most important thing about it for this video, however, is that this is what I think the reality of Demon Souls is, and I think knowledge goes deviant here because scholars do not understand the damage which their acts leave on the world and the evil they manifest in their blind pursuit of greater knowledge for its own sake. Latria is described as a learned land. Our soul art mentor, Freyk, is found in Latria, as is Spice. Every main area of Demon's Souls has one main lootable found within it, and Latria's is Spice, which we use to recover mana, which we use to cast magics and miracles. The phosphorescent pole is found here, as are other items which have an attunement or affinity for magic, like the Ring of Magical Sharpness, the Venerable Sage's outfit, the Wizard outfit, the Silver Catalyst, and the Silver Coronet. The Silver Catalyst and Coronet both mention being bestowed to magicians of the distinguished Jormidar school of magic, and that's the royal family which governed Latria. At least if the throne room being the throne room of Jormidar is anything to go by. The lore of Latria, the item drops, and environmental design all clearly highlight how this place was the magic place of this world. But when we get there, things are in shambles. An old man has taken over and has been fabricating his own demons. He deposed the old queen and has replaced her with a false idol. I like that scenario quite a bit. Before reaching the cathedral where she resides, we see an Iron Maiden ballista in her likeness which destroys those who come to her looking for salvation, and then the idol itself is a malicious demon. But the desperate prisoners pray to her anyways. They are in a cathedral praying to a literal false idol. The prisoners themselves are mostly mindless husks who drop a very poor number of souls, just like the depraved ones in the Valley of Defilement. And like them, I think the idea is to showcase how this place is set up to siphon the souls out of the prisoners, to make them suffer the loss of mental clarity. The difference between Latria and the Valley on this front might be seen in another item drop. The depraved ones drop Faint Stone, which is used to upgrade holy weapons. The prisoners drop Moonlight Stone, which is used to upgrade magic weapons. Of course, we know that the power manifested by faith is the same as the power manifested by reason. Still, I think it's noteworthy that the prisoners cling to the Moonlight Stones. They might hold on to them in an attempt to hold on to their senses. The Wardens of Latria are Mind Flayers, an old-school D&D enemy which eats the brains of sentient creatures. Did the Moonlight Stones give the prisoners any reprieve from the Mind Flayers' tortures? Speaking of torture, so you might not know this about me, because I rarely ever bring it up, but I love the Moongrass healing system. Just, give you a minute to absorb that. And in the first level of Latria, you cannot natively find any Moongrass healing items. In my video on the evolution of From Software's healing items, I talked about how this decision makes a big impact on the direction of the atmosphere and tension in Latria, because there's no point where your resources are not depleting, And because the first level is so big, you can get really deep into the place, and if you don't know when it ends, the extended tension cycle can really work you into a frenzy. I love the absence of grass in Latria 3.1 for that. But another reason I love it, a more relevant to this video reason, is that thematically I think there's something to be said about there not being any moonlight in this place, because enlightenment has slipped out of the fingers of the people of Latria. I wouldn't be doing my job correctly if I didn't note that the madness of the old monk isn't exclusive to the old monk, or that it might not have originated with him. It might actually be that he was just the one to finally take the fundamentally corrupt premise of the place to its logical, horrifying conclusion. If you're already obsessed with the soul arts and the manipulation of souls, is it such a surprise that a secret sect, the Soul Society, would emerge within your ranks who devote themselves to absorbing more and more souls? And why would that desire not just escalate? What is keeping the experimentations of the souls from going wild? And even though someone who went too far was exiled by the Queen, why wouldn't he just return and continue on with his mission? An idea or mission is birthed. Systems for achieving it are implemented. The consequences don't align with the intentions, the consequences are ignored, and the process is escalated. And like the spreading of the beast plague in Yharnam, you can see how the steps that take a learned land into an institution of insanity might actually be quite natural. If you're looking into the soul arts for a reason, you might start asking questions when the hybrid monstrosities crop up. But if you're looking into the soul arts for its own sake, nothing is beyond your purview. The Healing Church and Latria are two examples of moon-affiliated scholars gone astray. Let's go for the trifecta. If you cut off Seath's tail, it will drop the Moonlight Greatsword. Its item description reads, "This sword, one of the rare dragon weapons, came from the tail of Seath the Scaleless, the pale white dragon who betrayed his own. Seath is the grandfather of sorcery, and this sword is imbued with his magic, which shall be unleashed as a wave of moonlight." Right there, sorcery and moonlight are connected, but it goes even deeper. Seath's area contains the Duke's archive, and it's a massive library and place of research and experimentation, just like the research hall of the Healing Church, complete with both settings having moving stairs, high elevation, and cells with patients. They look the same and function the same because they are exploring the same idea. Seath delved deep into research for immortality, and while he did manage to obtain it, the pursuit caused him to lose his mind. The same story can be seen when you look at Big Hat Logan. He's connected to the Moon and Enlightenment because he's also a studying sorcerer, and he's actually in opposition to the prevailing order of Gwyn because he creates sorceries that directly compete with Gwyn's miracles. There's also his scimitar. I admit that it's the weakest connection, but Logan's is a crescent-shaped weapon. He also has talismans and such, and his story sees him pry into the secrets of Seath's sorceries and try to ascend. He believes the secret to ascension is to become a dragon, and in the end, he goes mad just like Seath did. And we can see this story yet again in Dark Souls 3 with Aesiros. His soul can be transposed to create the moonlight in Dark Souls 3, and there, its item description reads, "Legendary dragon weapon associated with Seath the Pale Drake. Charge strong attack to its limit to unleash Moonlight Wave." Aesiros, the consumed king, was infatuated with the search for moonlight, but in the end, it never revealed itself to him. Once again, the search for the moonlight, for enlightenment and knowledge, leads someone to stagnation. The thing about enlightenment is that it's fundamentally about rejecting the premise of the world, but the motivations of those who go mad in the pursuit of it in these games is always confined to a perspective which is contained within the world rather than beyond it. You cannot truly let go if you are this invested in the process. That investment is a feature of a material and desire-rich life. So perhaps there never was a chance for Seath. Immortality is an aberration to the natural flow of the world. Life is meant to end, an unending life is a stagnant life. FromSoft elaborated on that idea in Sekiro, but for meditation, the mind, and enlightenment, look no further than the Senpu monks. The monks of Senpu Temple abandoned the teachings of the Buddha. The twisting of their philosophies is seen in their martial arts, which Wolf can learn in order to acquire more money and material. And just like you might expect for a branch of learning that goes deviant, you can see that the monks of Senpu have become stagnant and decayed. Renala of the Full Moon rules over the magic/intellect faction of Elden Ring, but when she lost her husband, she also lost her will to go on. All she does now is rebirth the Culvers around her and cradle the rune which Radagon left behind for her. The moon-tuned scholars often go stagnant because they cannot give what enlightenment asks. An illumination on the nature of the world doesn't go down well with those who are invested in an incorrect way of looking at it. I don't think it's the truth which renders them insane, rather it's their inability to correlate the truth with their sense of themselves in the world they think they live in. The contradiction in perception versus reality is too great for them to bear, and so they snap. I discussed earlier, with Goldmask, how truth is perhaps best approached ex nihilo. Abandon your attachment to what you think you know before starting your journey. And then, when the truth is revealed to you, you won't be in conflict with it, and, in fact, it will fit comfortably within your mind. On that, let's discuss another important Buddhist teaching, the moon in a dewdrop. The moon in a dewdrop is a teaching which the master Dogen would use to describe meditation. He explained that just as the entire moon is reflected in a dewdrop, a complete awakening of the truth can be experienced by the individual human being. I've also heard this metaphor use a bowl of water, that just like how the entire moon, or its reflection, can be captured in a small bowl of water, enlightenment can be contained within the confines of a single human mind. The search for knowledge goes wrong not because it is beyond human comprehension, but because humans, often, reject what they see on the other side. Maybe the finger should have just pointed at enlightenment all along, eh? Because if it had, the image of the cosmos might have never been abused. Men will wear the moon to lie to other men, but there's another, more unnerving reason why knowledge and the pursuit of it can go so terribly wrong. The moon's image fits perfectly in a bowl of water, but so do many other things. The moon is symbolic for enlightenment, it is not enlightenment itself. Failing to absorb this, the scholars reach out to the cosmos in hopes for answers, and that which hears the call can be more destructive than a life of ignorance. There's more things in the cosmos than moons and truths. It would take a blind faith that whatever comes from the cosmos is desirable, for the sects and scholars here to look at the outer beings they come into contact with and see them as anything other than monsters. But when you've destroyed the world looking for answers, when something steps out from beyond to greet you, do you really have a choice to not believe? What would that do to you? Your entire society is devoted to a task which seals your own fate. When you look at the bringer of destruction, could you understand that his presence was your own fault? Those who meet the outer beings come to have their civilizations swallowed by the earth, and the monster's presence which brought about their destruction lingers in the dark. In the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, we go to Ulasil and see what men wrought upon themselves when they pried too deep into forbidden knowledge. The item description for most of the Ulasil sorceries, the ones we find in the actual DLC at least, reads, Abyss sorcery discovered by an Ulasil sorcerer on the brink of madness. And this pursuit of knowledge was what compelled the Ulasilians to awaken Manus, torture him, and learn from him all they could. But as repressed humanity does, it went wild within Manus and transformed him into a monster. And as Manus transformed, so did the scholars who beckoned him and pried from him the dark knowledge. They share in his monster's new form, writhing shadows, tree-like, and with red eyes dotted around. A deviant pursuit of knowledge, characterized by a demonic hunger for the humanity of others, fits in well with what we've been discussing. A hunger is born, and as it is fed, it grows greater and greater, until a visitor from beyond arrives to inflict his will upon the land. If you are devoted enough to your mission, you might convince yourself that that thing which has come knocking at the door has come to answer your prayers, but just as easily, it might have been a chance encounter, and its intentions can be completely devoid of compassion for you. The awakening of Manus, monster mode, spawned the abyss which destroyed Ulasil. And this story has been revisited often. In Elden Ring, deep beneath the Lands Between, we can find the remains of the eternal city of Nokron. The Knight Maiden Twin Crowns item description reads, "Twin crowns worn by the Knight Maidens of the Eternal City indicates the highest clerical rank and hides the eyes with silk. Long ago the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground. Now they live under a false night sky in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of the stars and their Lord of Night." What can a civilization learn from glimpsing a false sky? The false sky was summoned by an invader from beyond. After the Greater Will banished the city to the underworld, despair took over. In Kalit we can find a Celian sorcery called Eternal Darkness, and its item description reads, "Forbidden sorcery of Celia, town of sorcery. Creates a space of darkness that draws in sorceries and incantations. This sorcery can be cast while in motion." Originally a lost sorcery of the Eternal City, the despair that brought about its ruin made manifest. The effect of this sorcery is to absorb other spells that are cast in combat, and it does so by summoning a black hole. Astel's remembrance refers to him as a falling star of ill omen. Was he perhaps pulled down to the Eternal City by the gravity of the void which their despair birthed? Chance encounters with the beyond are often sought to accelerate the process of learning, but when the outer beings come into contact with humanity, it is often to the latter's detriment. When Wolf rings the demon bell, he attracts the presence of a spirit which increases the difficulty of the game, but also improves item drops. The bell is found in Senpu Temple. Did the monks have a fleeting encounter with this demon and turn from the way of the Buddha, or was this demon born from their indulgence of the material world? Formless Odin lingers as a presence within blood and is seemingly concentrated in the chapel which bears his name. Over the course of Bloodborne's story, assuming the player rescued Ariana, her features will become paler and paler, reflecting the Cainhurst legacy within her being brought to the outside. Odin has latched onto her, and in the end of the game, she will birth a celestial child from this communion. Byrgenwerth massacred the fishing hamlet to get Kos, and the atrocity they committed spawned a curse which follows and torments every hunter. In the Hunter's Nightmare, we can find the research hall where the Healing Church did its experiments. The patients talk about hearing the sound of water. The Deep Sea Runes item description reads, "Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep and an augur of the Eldritch Truth. Overcome this hindrance and seek what is yours." Beyond the waters which the patients are in tune with is the moon in the Nightmare Fishing Hamlet, but it's cursed, and so there's no enlightenment here. Is that why those who are tuned to the sound of this water become living failures? Our encounter with Rom brings us closer to seeing the truth of the world, but it also drops the red moon and ushers in the destruction of Yarn. The Moon Runes item description reads, "A secret symbol left by Carol, runesmith of Byrgenwerth, a transcription of Moon as spoken by the Greater Ones inhabiting the Nightmare. Gain more blood echoes. The Great Ones that inhabit the Nightmare are sympathetic in spirit and often answer when called upon. But sympathetic in spirit is not meant as them being deeply emotionally invested or compassionate or anything like that. The Japanese is trying to convey that they are sensitive to outside stimuli. If you've ever wondered why the Great Ones don't all act compassionate in the light of this description, there you go. Kas and Ram seem to have had kindness in their hearts. Kas brought abundance to the fishing hamlet. Ram keeps the red moon from descending. But this isn't universal. Odin, the wet nurse, and the moon presence are not forces you should want to reach out to, not when you consider the effect which reaching out to them has had. In Bergenworth, we can find a note that reads, "The spider hides all manner of rituals certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared." A more accurate translation would go, "True enlightenment must not be shared, because those who glance the red moon hanging low go mad." To reiterate, the moon is a symbol. Enlightenment is not literally in the cosmos, but failing to note the difference, scholars attune themselves to it. And when they get a response from horrifying monstrosities, their need for an answer compels them to embrace demons and their own destruction. Let's get philosophical here for a moment. What would you give for enlightenment? Would you sacrifice your humanity? Would you hunt the humanity of others? Utter heresy? Would you forfeit your country? Risk losing your mind? Would you do these things knowing there's a chance that what the world offers up in return might not be enlightenment at all? If you walked the path halfway through and then began having doubts, if you came to believe that your studies were leading you to destruction in the light of everything we've discussed so far, would you continue, or would you destroy the path everywhere it can lead, as well as yourself, to keep others safe? A demon can wear a friendly face. How do you know you can trust it? Do you play it safe, or throw the die and let the world teeter on your certainty? Cross the Rubicon and endure the fires which follow. Fires of Rubicon explores the relationship between humanity and the coral, a sentient form of energy capable of bridging the gap of a human existence and something else. Capable of interfacing with some older models of human AC pilots, the coral was harvested and researched half a century before the events of the game. The Research Institute's head scientist saw what could await mankind if the budding relationship between men and coral was not snuffed out, and so he ignited it and destroyed the solar system. But the coral was not destroyed, only damaged, and half a century later, it was rediscovered on the ruins of Rubicon 3, which ignited a mad rush by mankind to try and collect as much of it as possible. To some, it is nothing more than a valuable energy source, but our protagonist can hear the coral, and the potential futures born by this communion are no less horrifying than the chance encounters with the outer entities we've discussed so far. These horrors are endured in the belief that something awaits the perpetrators in the end which is so glorious that it will all have been worth it. Have you thought about my question? How far would you go? Myself? I don't know. If you take the first step, then the second step is just one more step. If you walk half the path, you've already done that much, and your tolerances will have been altered. So maybe you don't turn a city into hell in one day, you just gradually accept one more atrocity, and you justify it to yourself believing there's some higher end that's being met. Lawrence had an idea. What if instead of looking at the moon's reflection, like a bunch of nerds, they were to just experiment with the old blood? And they did, and again, and no matter how often they failed to get the results they wanted, the healing church would not change tact until Lawrence was gone and the choir and menses had split from each other. Yarnum seems to have always had a bit of a beast problem, but after the consecration of old blood, the problem became a crisis, which then became a catastrophe. The early days of the beast hunt are characterized by Gurman and Maria. Nimble movements and fast weapons like the burial blade and the rakuyo. later days have larger beasts, and so larger, heavier weapons are used. After Gehrman disappeared into the hunter's dream, Ludwig became the leader of the hunters, and his era's weapons are things like the Ludwig's Holy Blade and the Kirkhammer. The problem facing Yharnam grew steadily worse as obstinate scholars escalated instead of re-evaluating. And as the problem grew, so did the force they needed to apply to keep a lid on it. Lawrence never changed his mind. He, or at least a Healing Church High official, can be seen in a painting in Canehurst insinuating a relationship with the royal family there. The item description for the third umbilical cord we find in the abandoned workshop reads, "A great relic, also known as the Cord of the Eye." Every infant Great One has this precursor to the umbilical cord. Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. The third umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with a pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. Used to gain insight and, so they say, eyes on the inside, although no one remembers what that truly entails. This is the cord which Lawrence got from Queen Annalise. With it, he and Gehrman created the hunter's dream, and in exchange, it seems like the Moon Presence wanted a child. Having massacred one infant Great One to acquire this cord, Lawrence went on the hunt for another, but succumbed to the beasthood along the way. The Thumeru Chalice dungeon line that leads to the still pregnant Queen Yharnam first leads to the bloodletting beast. Its head has a massive scar, and a headless variant of the boss can later be found. On the altar of the Grand Cathedral we can find the skull of Lawrence, which has a scar as well. Dialogue spoken by Lawrence can be found in the Chalice dungeons, and knowing how FromSoft reuses cut concepts from the base game in the DLCs, us talking to Ludwig's decapitated head in the Hunter's Nightmare might have originally been the idea with Lawrence as the bloodletting beast. The transformation into a beast can be halted by the holy men of the church, but it cannot be averted. Instead, it just recoils much harder when it is finally activated, and the holy men become the most twisted beasts of them all. The bloodletting beast is Lawrence. I've argued this many times, and I've never been convinced otherwise. And the fate that awaits him in the Hunter's Nightmare, the game's representation of hell, is to be mindless and aflame. Punishment for his transgressions. His skull and his lucidity rests under an alternate version of the cathedral he rests in, so close to recovering himself, but never given the chance to do so. The pursuit of enlightenment and the communion with the moon did not play well with Lawrence, but he's only the second most horrendous beast we can encounter in the game. First place goes to Ludwig, and his relationship with the moon might shed more light on the nature of the world. Those who persist in these worlds are degraded. We rarely fight these legends at their peak. Usually all that is left is whatever lump of flesh was able to drag itself from the great fight where they earned their legendary status. The cycles which govern these worlds leech life, crush the will, and turns people into monsters. Ludwig, like Lawrence, is trapped in hell and is cursed to forever mindlessly stomp and smash on the corpses which find themselves in his arena. His head is dazed and half dreaming, and he seems to actually be piloted by an arcane-spewing mouth which has manifested itself on his shoulders. Just like Lawrence, the great man has been reduced to a mad and a mindless beast, tormented in the nightmare. Suffering is born from attachment. Enlightenment is the path out. And after he takes enough of a beating, and the holy moonlight sword dislodges itself from his body, his sanity is reawoken.
You were at my side all along. My true mentor. My guiding moonlight.
A cursory glance at the manifestation of enlightenment, and Ludwig is cured. But why does this power not affect everyone equally? I suppose Lawrence being in the Chalice dungeon precluded him from seeing the moon. But what about the others who lose their way? Dojin's experiments occur in an abandoned dungeon where the moonlight does not reach. The Sokushin Butsu monks are in a cave. Artorius doesn't see the moonlight because it's still day. Midra is trapped in his manse. King Alant is kept within the old one. Seath is blind, so he couldn't see it anyways. Likewise, Shabriri's eyes have been gouged out, and Osiros and the old monk don't have any eyes either. The Healing Church models itself on the iconography and practices which were born in Bergenworth. Chief among them was the covering of the eyes. The idea is that it wards off external stimuli and allows oneself to develop eyes on the inside. But if you're blocking out the world around you, wouldn't it stand to reason that all you have is yourself? And if the ideas and beliefs you harbor within are wrong, what does meditating on them do for you? Is it like watering a bad seed? Why is it so obviously correct to ignore the real world in front of you in favor of the imagined world within? Could the failure to return to reality be as simple as these characters just literally not being able to see the moonlight? Perhaps. But I think there's something more. After Ludwig has been defeated, we acquire the Guidance Rune. Its item description reads, a Carol rune discovered by the old hunter Ludwig, along with the Holy Moonlight Sword. Boosts amount of life recovered by rallying. When Ludwig closed his eyes, he saw darkness, or perhaps nothingness, and that is where he discovered the tiny beings of light. Ludwig was certain that these playful dancing sprites offered guidance. They could empty Ludwig of his fears, at least in the midst of a hunt. Ludwig believed that the light he saw when he closed his eyes was a celestial guidance. But, and I've noted this before, the Guidance Rune and the Beast Rune are the same rune. There's just some tendrils missing. Which is the original? Was Ludwig being led astray by an incomplete glimpse he had of the beasthood within him? Is beasthood ascendance without guidance? Has it grown too many tendrils because it ingested the power of transformation wholly without knowing what parts of it to reject? Or is beasthood perhaps just the first stage of a mind questioning itself? The boundaries of existence are loosened, so you sink to the bottom, but after that you can climb up again and reach higher than before. Is it like pruning a tree? You remove the tendrils of the beast rune until it looks enough like a figure bowing to the moon. In that case, is it just the idea of evil again? Are the Guidance Rune and the Beast Rune the same thing, filtered through the outlook of the beholder? Like miracles and magic and humanity and demons in Demon Souls, the mindset you apply makes the thing real. Is it your belief that shapes reality? If you believe in the power of enlightenment and the purity of the moon, then you will see enlightenment and a way out. But if you do not, then all that awaits you is beasthood. Perhaps this is also the only thing differentiating vermin and phantasms. Whether or not Ludwig saw the guidance of the stars, he was able to pull back from beasthood. Something caused that. Goldmask's pursuit of the truth led him to discovering that the Order of the Earth Tree was built on a lie. At the end of his questline, we can acquire his proposed remedy for the order of the world, the Mending Rune of the Perfect Order. Its item description reads, rune discovered by the noble Goldmask, used to restore the fractured Elden Ring when brandished by the Elden Lord. A rune of transcendental ideology which will attempt to perfect the Golden Order, the current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. No better than men. I think the idea of the Eldritch Truth is the humanity of the gods. That's the secret which Goldmask uncovered about the Erdtree Order. The repeated cycles of the mech economies of Armored Core are directed by human desires and the inadequacies of the AIs which are constructed to govern men. Human nature is why every faction in Sekiro pursues the divine immortal life of the dragon's heritage. It was Gwyn's human fear of those who would succeed him which doomed the world of Dark Souls, and the entire conflict in Demon Souls is the conflict of the human soul and its tendency towards doing the work of demons. If there is anything behind the Eldritch Truth, I think it's that. For all of their arcane cosmic powers, the Old Ones cannot have children, and that bond is all they want. Too much time spent looking at the moon blinds the pursuers of knowledge and ascension from the world around them, and it disconnects them from it and what should matter most to them. Alant abandons Ariona, Osiros kills Ocelot, Owl tries to kill Wolf. Lawrence tried carving up Queen Yarnum to fulfill his deal with the moon presence, and now Queen Yarnum lingers around the world, doomed to hear the cries of her child. The game puts on a massive front with all of its Lovecraftian words and cosmicism monster design, but at its heart, Bloodborne is actually a very traditional gothic horror story, where a ghost must be quieted and the wrong done to her must be righted. The nightmare newborn must be silenced. They repeat that story in the DLC. The vengeance of Kos, actually Ghost in the Japanese, because ghost, lingers just like Queen Yarnum, and the ghost will not be calmed until the cries of its newborn can be silenced. The Eldritch Truth is the humanity of the gods, and the realization that their unfathomable desires are nothing deeper than the bond between parent and child. But that's not good enough for the scholars of Byrgenwerth, and so they hunt the Great Ones. In 1994's Kingsfield, we were given the Moonlight for the very first time. It was originally the petrified dragon sword belonging to the fallen father of our protagonist, John Alfred Forrester. The father and son pair both descended into the royal catacombs, the father first, son after, and deep within, John found the sword near his father's grave. He brought it along on his journey until he met the black dragon Gaira, who awoke within it the power of the moonlight in order to destroy Reinhardt III. Reinhardt had lodged himself deep within the royal catacombs and had become an evil tree monster feeding the seed of evil left behind in the world. He was Kegare. The moonlight was enlightenment, the perfect weapon for the job. But it was also the bond between father and son. Reinhardt killed his father, John avenged his. In Kingsfield 2, we traverse the island of Melanat and come to understand that Gaira's presence on the island was a curse. The water of the island, once drunk, would kill you if you did not continue to drink it, and this doomed Melanat's population. And so, from the white dragon Seath, we were gifted the Darkslayer, a sword with the power to destroy Gaira. But this wasn't because Seath was benevolent. Gaira is positioned as a vile, evil god, but Seath is as well. We don't destroy Gaira to rid the world of evil, we destroy Gaira to rid Seath of competition. In Kingsfield 3, Seath poisons the mind of now King John Alfred Forrester and spreads its evil influence on the land through him. Before the game begins, Alexander, the protagonist of the second game, hides the moonlight in a lava cavern to keep it safe. He then becomes a light mage and halts the influence of his king by sealing him within a magical border. Still, the world languishes in the evil which Seath has wrought, until Prince Lyle comes of age and sets out to undo the evil of the land and defeat his corrupted father. In the end, if the player reassembled the moonlight and bests John, the king will regain his senses. Reassembling the broken moonlight is no easy feat. It requires the player to take a detour back into the tombs where Kingsfield 1 took place, where they discover that the lingering form of Gaira still exists. It's a great sequence, always love it when I visit an area from a previous game and a later game, and it ends with Gaira reassembling the sword for us. The sword represents enlightenment as well as the bond between father and son. When it was shattered, so was the link connecting Lyle and John, but with the sword reforged, the paternal bond can be reforged as well. After defeating the king, he will come to his senses and will merge the moonlight with the X-Selector, our main sword in Kingsfield 3, to create a sword capable of destroying Seath. As the case is often in these games, the ultimate evil is hiding. See the Old One and the Land, see the Moon Presence and Gurman, and the Elden Beast and Radagon. We must first confront its human emissary, and after we do, and the king has merged the swords, we are teleported to the moon to face off against Seath. The swords are forged from deception, but the power they have is still real. And I think that's something we can apply to every story we've discussed in this video so far. The moon is often used to lie, but that's not because enlightenment is false or evil, but because those who seek the power which the moon bestows do so because they are desperate. They want an answer, and if the moon doesn't have one, they will deceive themselves into thinking one was given. But look at Lyle's triumph, at Rani's slaying of her fingers, or at Ludwig's awakening. The moon's power is real, at least if you believe in it. What leads the fallen scholars astray is their perception. I am the finger that points at the moon. Don't look at my finger, look at the moon. I think the moonlight as enlightenment is a fascinating idea. A pure and cold radiant light which cannot be sullied by the impure things of the world. A body of water can be truly foul, but the reflection of the moon will still have the power of the moon. Kegare cannot touch that. This connection is why I think enlightenment was the natural successor topic to my Kegare video. That's 2 done, 3 to go. If you're watching this video early on Patreon, know that I am dutifully chipping away at what comes next, and it should be delivered to you soon. I've already spoiled the topic in threads and posts here and there, but in case you missed those, let me build this up somewhat. So Kegare was the obvious first video because I'm always talking about it. Enlightenment is a great counter to Kegare because of them things what we talked about in this video already. And the next video, likewise, will be a very natural extension of the ideas we've brought up so far. Next time, we'll be exploring what happens to those who don't ascend, and are instead knocked out of tune with the harmony of the world. Join me there when we discuss the madness of From Software. If you're watching this video after it was released on YouTube, know that you can get access to the next Themes of From Software video by joining the channel Patreon over at patreon.com/medievalmegaman. I like to try and release a video every month, and when I have one ready early, they always show up there first. My way of saying thanks to you guys for supporting me over the years. You could also just message me if you don't feel like handing over money. I've got a Discord link in the description and I'm fairly active in my server, so don't be afraid of reaching out. It's really weird to be prompted to engage with videos because watching them is often such a passive activity, but if you want to support the work I do here in other ways than through Patreon, engagement really is the best way. Leaving likes, comments, and such. Don't feel like you need to be clever either. If you want to leave a comment, it can just be something like, praise the moon. Engagement pleading out of the way, let me tell you about the people who've been there for me as I assembled this video and who you should check out if you liked what you got here. Kasidiv/Theomony/Angel No Moon/Pick a Name Already Girl can be found on YouTube, where she dives into the FromSoft library, and she and I actually have a Shadow Tower story discussion video tentatively planned for recording in the not too distant future. We did one for Kingsfield already, and we streamed an Elden Ring 2 discussion, which are both linked below, along with an excellent video she did on the apocalypse of From Software. My sidekick and partner in crime, Loki, has to be mentioned here as well. He's given me most of my insight into the actual Japanese scripts of these games, and it was largely through him and Sinclair and Sophie, coming up, where I got interested in exploring these games from an Eastern perspective. If you want to dive into the retranslated stories and explore these worlds again, I highly recommend his work. His channel and his website are both linked below, and I'd also encourage you to check out the Abyssal Archive as well as the Demonic Archive. The definitive story breakdowns for both Dark Souls and Demon Souls. To whet the appetite for those, I've left links to the discussion he and I had about the story of Gwyn and the story of Demon Souls. Sinclair Lore is a channel mainstay, and I've recorded more with them over the years than I have with any other creators. Sophie and Sin have catalogued the extended From Software library more thoroughly than perhaps anyone else, and if you want FromSoft content without all the self-seriousness and joylessness you see on channels, like mine, give them a look at. I've left a link to the video they and I recorded on Manus, which spins off into a series on the Daughters of the Dark, but I frankly recorded so many videos with them that if that one isn't to your liking, just search my name on their channel, you'll have like 10 wits to pick from. And then you'll realize that I'm the dead weight and you'll just watch the videos they do solo. My main source for all things Elden Ring continues to be Smotown, and if you want a good video of his, which tangentially relates to some of the ideas I discussed in this video, I recommend his video on Goldmask and the Golden Order. I'd also be remiss to not bring up that he'll be releasing the Grace Given book next year, which explores the story of Elden Ring. While you wait, just put all of his videos on a playlist and go through that playlist a couple of times. There's the ever-brilliant Meph, who always comes in clutch with the wonderful Bloodborne wiki, the best resource on that game and a perennial channel favorite. If there's anything at all you've ever wanted to know about Bloodborne, just go over to the Bloodborne-wiki, and more than likely it's there for you to quickly pick up. And I'd also like to thank K8's Knight and Last Protagonist for helping me clear up some of the lore and timeline issues I was having in production. Links for these creators and their works has been provided in the description box below. I am AesirAesthetics. You are viewer man, or woman. See you in the next video.